All right. Well, so you both said you grew up in some pretty different places around the world, which I'm sure had a formative role in your lives. How do you think that influenced the genre of music that you play today?
So I grew up listening to mainly classical music. That's the majority of what was played. And then I listened to the Beatles nonstop in high school, and then U2. And then I kind of listened for probably a long time after that, like to female singer-songwriters. So, music was a big part of my life in my childhood, but there wasn't a lot of listening. So I feel like, my musical influence has come through, classical training, but then just like listening to artists, I would say in a similar genre to what we write now, for the last 20 years.
Yeah. I don't know that I would say like place was as much of the factor for me. I had I guess it was a little bit in the sense that I wasn't exposed to a lot of the same musical influences that I think my compatriots here were. But I remember growing up in high school when kazaa was a thing. Sorry, I should feel like I'm like pleading the fifth here, self-incrimination. But I would get a lot of music off of kazaa, and I would this is just showing like I was a really nerdy kid apparently, because I would like find words that I liked or phrases that I liked, and I would like plug those into kazaa, and I would just like see what came up. So I was listening to like Celtic stuff, like some things that were like on more mainstream. I was listening to like Finnish metal bands and like, oh man, like one Swedish group with like Swedish metal group with an opera singer. Like I just was listening to a lot of really different things. And I think that was good because I do think that musically, at least, my influences were also kind of like a little all over the board. But I also think it's funny because I feel like I listen pretty broadly now, but I'm still like discovering musicians that everybody else kind of grew up with, and like names that I knew. But like I heard my first I really listened to Pink Floyd for the first time like a year ago, and I was like, oh, some of this is really good. I like remember being like, have you heard of this artist Pink Floyd? And people are like, are you kidding me? And like, yeah, like classic rock, same thing. Or I discover a lot of like older musicians now, but I think that's actually kind of interesting too, because I actually really like that almost like historical lens on things, and I really like going back in time and sort of seeing who influenced who. And
yeah. Well, and like I would say on that note too, I think both of us, how we grew up and where we grew up, actually we were both quite sheltered from mainstream pop culture. So I think both of us, from our childhoods and even till now, like we didn't have a lot of influence from, like the top 40 radio station, which I think has an influence of some sort.
Speak for yourself. I really liked Spice Girls and Shakira.
Well, I'm not saying we don't like top 40, but like that was a minimal influence.
Just odd influences.
You know that. We talked about that.
All right. So is music a full-time job for each of you, or do you have day jobs as well?
Yeah, we both bring in six-figure incomes from music right now. Just kidding. No, it's a part-time profession.
Yes.
Yeah, we both have full-time day jobs.
And how do you feel about the current balance between your day jobs and the band? Is like being a full-time band something you'd aspire towards?
I think it's interesting because I think both Darren and I would love to be devoting more time to music, and I think will as things heat up. But the thing about both of our jobs is, so to give a little bit of background and disclosure on this front, so Darren does small business consulting on the side, or I guess not on the side, but like that is his other job. And I was a strategy consultant for about 5 years, and I'm actually going back to grad school for a year in just a few short months, which will be kind of cool. But one thing that I think is very important to both of us in our lives is being able to sort of have that balance, ebb and flow between the amount of time that we're putting towards music and just the time that we're able to devote towards other interests. And something that I know we've both talked about has been that, like, I think that there's this dream that a lot of people have, or this sort of vision of like, to make it, to like really excel at music or at anything creative, you have to like only do that. And I don't think that that's true at all. And actually, I think quite the opposite, that I see many of my friends who are full-time musicians kind of really struggling, not just in the cliche kind of financial ways, but like struggling to find that kind of creative freedom and that creative sort of deep well, I guess, that you get from being able to do a lot of different things as well. I think that there's a lot of pressure on your creativity when you're doing that for your full income as well, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm definitely not knocking that, but I think both Darren and I have found that our music is better, and our like ability to be musicians is better as a result of doing other things. Mm-hmm, the challenge is less about like, how do you do this full time, and more about like, how do you gain enough control over like how much time you're putting into music when, that you can sort of dial that way down, like the time you're putting into other things, like way down when the music is sort of has momentum and is taking on a life of its own, and then dial those things up again when you need to switch gears, or when there's an ebb.
Right. It's also like it's a forced mental break. You
Yeah.
have to take a break.
And it's also a very creative, like inspiring break, I guess, too, because I mean, I think both of us are very thankful like that our day jobs have given us so much freedom and support for, doing this like on the side, and pursuing this. But I feel like it also kind of feeds a different part of ourselves by being entrepreneurs and really like looking at the full spectrum of what it actually means to be a musician, and the kind of crazy array of business side skills or business skills that you need to actually really move forward as a musician are hugely inspiring and just exciting. I think both of us really have a lot of fulfillment, from that side of things, not just the songwriting and the performing, but the business side of it too.
Yeah, Darren and I both like genuinely love running the business of our music. I don't know that we're like great at it on all levels, and like sometimes like we definitely learn with every iteration of our music, and I think we've definitely also learned when it's good to like get help from others. But like the overall management and stuff, I think both Darren and I really love that.
Yeah.
And speaking of business, Darren, you also have a side company, right? Drift Music. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So I started about 2.5 years ago. Basically, I started it because I, was looking around as a musician and seeing how few places there were for musicians, especially in our genre, but just in general, for musicians to play to a listening audience and get paid for it and not have to do a ton of promotion, but they can come up, they play a show, they walk up to the venue and there's an audience waiting for them. They play like a 45-minute set, often unplugged, and the audience is like completely quiet and listening to them. So it's very different than a lot of other venues out there. It's something that I've heard a lot of feedback from musicians, say that this is like the best show I've ever played, or like one of the best shows I've ever played because of these different factors. And so that's why I started Drift Music. Right now, of course, because of the current situation, it's on a bit of a hiatus, but it will come back for sure. And it's something that I think there's a huge demand for and desire for from the audience perspective out there. People crave a live, intimate environment. A lot of people don't want to go out to the bars and the clubs for any number of reasons, and they really want to have a more personalized experience, and that's kind of the whole core of why I created Drift, for the audience and for the musician.
And the venues themselves are pretty unique, right? Like I went to one of these shows and it was on a steamship. Exactly.
So part of the mission for the tertiary mission for Drift Music is not just the musician's experience and the audience experience, it's also for the venue experience. So they're often almost entirely actually in historic venues. And that's also something that benefits the venues themselves. So the steamship and the historic mansion, both here, like in Vancouver and some other cities that I've been kind of in conversation with, these concerts actually benefit the venue, these historic venues as well. So it's kind of a threefold, benefit, to these different entities. So
Darren has a MBA in social enterprise, so
yeah,
you can tell.
It helps.
All right. And if a band wanted to apply to put on one of these shows, how should they get in contact with you?
Basically, if they go to Driftin, DRYFT, drift.in, and they go to the kind of get involved page, and there's a submission guidelines on the bottom of the page.
All right.
Yeah.